guys, and welcome back to another episode of Next to Madison. On today's episode, I am sitting down with an amazing man who has had a near-death experience. He is a thrill seeker, an adventure seeker. Some may say he's crazy, but he does a lot of rock climbing, freehand, what would be called bouldering, and we're really going to kind of drill down into his experiences, but also the mental focus and discipline it takes to reach your goals, whether they're physical goals or mental goals, work goals, any kind of goal that you have in your life, and really drowning out that noise to make sure that you're hitting them and kind of living the best life that you can live. So with that being said, I'm going to bring on my guest today on Next to Madison, Luke Childers. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks, Madison. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you for taking time out of your rock climbing schedule to do it.
Yeah, I'm actually going back tomorrow. So I'm just home for about 2 days to kind of recover, get myself in order, and it's back out on the circuit. Got
Okay,
more to do.
Let's talk about the type of rock climbing you do so people are aware.
So there's several types of discipline. There's traditional climbing, there's sport climbing, and then there's free soloing, and then there's another discipline that I do is called bouldering. I actually do a little bit of all of them, but for today's activity in conversation, really bouldering is what I focus on the last couple of years pretty extensively. And what that is it's always unroped climbing. But you peak out at about 20 to 25 feet or wherever you're really kind of comfortable. So it's like free soloing. I'm sure many of you have seen Alex Honnold's the movie Free Solo, where he's on El Cap soloing up like thousands of feet.
Okay.
That's not what I'm doing. What I'm doing is capped out at about 2 stories. So it's pretty exciting in the fact that in bouldering, every time you fall, you hit the ground. So it's pretty risky in that way. But we bring what's called bouldering pads, and they're usually, these thick foam pads, and we carry them on our backs. We always get asked, like, what this big thing is. It looks like a mattress you're hiking in the woods. Maybe some of you have been on hikes in Colorado or other parts of the area where there's climbing and seen people coming by with these mattresses on their back. But essentially what we're doing is bringing gym mats, portable gym mats, out to the rocks. You put them all over the ground where there's rocks sticking up, intrusions, stumps, things like that. So if you fall, it's as soft and as level as you can make it. So every time you fall, you don't get injured is the idea, although injury is pretty common in bouldering.
Do you fall every time?
When I'm pushing myself, which is most of the time I go out, yeah, like I'm expecting on any given day I'll fall, 20, 30 times at least, constantly falling.
So why not traditional rock climbing?
So I do traditional rock climbing. The thing I love about bouldering is the purity of it, right? So the thing with traditional climbing is you need a partner, you need a rope, and then you also have to have, you bring gear and you place it into the rock. You've maybe seen they're like little friends, these little things you cam or slide into rocks. Okay. So the idea behind traditional climbing is there's no permanence of gear left, right? So anything you place in the rock to protect you from in the advent of a fall, you actually remove out again later. So traditional climbing is a form of rope climbing, and you need a partner for that. And for me, I really like bouldering, one, because I can do it by myself. It can be solo. And number two, the purity of it. There's no ropes. There's no gear. There's no fumbling with equipment. And if you can't climb something, it's only because you really can't climb something, not because, I needed to get a piece of gear, or I couldn't get my rope here, or I was scared of this, that, or the other thing. So it eliminates a lot of those elements and just focus on the purity of climbing movement itself.
So when you start when you're going out bouldering, do you know where you're going, or do you just kind of hike in the woods and find something that you feel you can latch onto?
Most of the time I know where I'm going. Now, I have a history of doing a lot of first ascents in places like Colorado. I've helped author guidebooks. I've put in, it's called an installing or doing first ascent works, and probably over 50 routes, that's, rope routes, and probably over 300 first ascents at bouldering in the Colorado region.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so when I do those things, you're going out and the rock is your canvas, and you quite literally, it's all about your vision and seeing like a beautiful feature and being the first person, in history to tackle that feature. So I do a lot of that as well, which is full on adventure climbing. You don't know how it's going to end. You can be knocked. I've knocked off blocks the size of small cars. So it can get extensive. Yeah, you can have really crazy things happen. Now, a lot of times when I'm going out to push myself, it'll be in a guidebook. It's a line that someone's already done that I'm going to repeat to like test myself is
Okay.
the other form. And that's more organized and I know where I'm going usually with that.
How do you prep yourself mentally for this?
So, mental preparation is huge. It's kind of like, if you want to get healthy, diet's 70, 80% of it, right? Most
Yeah.
of like good fitness is really just tending your diet. Whereas in a lot of climbing, a lot of it is also discipline and focus. So for me, mental preparation begins with strength training, base fitness training. So I train in progressive overload cycles for my fingers. It's called hangboarding. What we'll do is hang off of these small edges, and you literally do sessions where you hang on as small as holds as you can. And often I'll add weight, depending on the size of the hold, you'll keep adding overloaded weight. So you get stronger and stronger fingers. So the stronger you get, the easier it is to be more confident in what you're doing, right? Because if you feel like you can hang on to anything, you're mentally going to be a lot more prepared. So really a lot of mental preparation is in how physically prepared you are as well. It will actually be a huge dictator on how your mental game is.
Right. No, that makes absolute sense, because you
Yeah.
really do, mental so much is also part of, the physical challenge as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, and I've spent years developing training methods. I have not missed a training cycle in almost 8 years. Like, I don't miss cycles. I don't have excuses. I don't give up. Uh, you do the work, right? Self discipline, if you want to be really, on the cutting edge, or for me, I'm an old guy, right? So I'm about to be 43. In climbing, that's like you're an old guy,
Okay.
but at the same rate, because of my level of dedication to training and focus, I'm still like in the lower echelons of elite climbers. Like I'm, still climbing extraordinarily difficult things for my age. And that's due in part to just a consistency over time. It's not like, oh, this guy's amazing and he rolled off the couch. And, it's not like it's like a marathoner. You're not just going to hop off the couch and go run a 2:30 marathon, a 2 hour, 30-minute marathon. Like you have to work up to it. And it takes a lot of discipline, a lot of consistency over time.
So when what you talk about these training cycles, what is involved in the training cycle?
So interesting. So I do both. So I'll do training cycles to literally make my fingers and my forearms. I try to get some beefy forearms going. Work on those bad boys. It's almost as big
Yeah.
as my bicep. It's kind of hard to see. But anyway, so a lot of forearm endurance and strength, getting your tendons and fingers really strong. And I like to supplement in bodybuilding, like hypertrophy style activities. So I do a lot of weightlifting as well. Um, Strength to weight ratio is very important in things like climbing. Obviously, the lighter you are, the stronger your fingers are, the harder you can climb. But
Yeah.
I found a good balance between like some people want to be super trim and like really tiny to climb. But I've found that, more muscle brings more strength. So I try to find a balance of like, overall athletic physique and fitness. And then I strengthen the ever loving bejesus out of my fingers because the smaller things you can hold on to, the better you're going to be every time.
Do people think you're crazy?
Absolutely. Yeah. My own family does. They'll comment on Facebook posts and they're like, oh my God, you're going to kill yourself. And in fact, I almost actually did kill myself at one point in time.
Let's talk
It,
about that story.
yeah. So that was epic. So I'm a climber, mountaineer, and a telemark skier, and I've done ice climbing and all of these things for 30 plus years now. So I've been doing this since I was a kid, since I was, eighth grade, something like that. So it's been a long endeavor for me, and it's always been, I've always taken a very safe, pragmatic approach to climbing. Like, obviously, no one wants to get killed or injured. So you practice as much safety as you can. And I had succeeded for many, many years, almost 30, in fact. It was actually about 23 years in when this accident happened. um, I ended up taking a 60-foot ground fall
Oh,
out climbing. And yeah, and I'll give you the details on that. The end result was I actually fractured or blew up my femur. I have a screw
oh,
in my hip, and I broke my back as well. It fused, so my back's fully fused. But to get into the story itself, I'll just step back for a minute, just a minute here and digress and give you a setting. So it's a summer day. Uh, Maybe you know where Clear Creek Canyon, Colorado is, just outside of Golden, Colorado. It's, where you're in Denver right now, right, Madison?
I am,
Yeah.
yes.
So you're just probably 40 minutes from where I was climbing in this accident that occurred. It's called Clear Creek Canyon outside of Golden, Colorado.
Okay.
It was a summer day. If I remember, it was like an August day. I'd been climbing for about 5 days in a row, kind of worn out. Went out with my now ex-wife and a couple of her friends. And we started in on a warm-up climb, which is typically, not a big deal. So this is what's kind of classic about this too, is, you know, after almost 30 years of climbing, I get hurt on a warm-up or almost get killed on a warm-up. So a lot of things were going on that, shouldn't have probably happened that ended up leading to this accident, which is very common. People were chatty. It's a climb that's below your limit. It's a warm up. It's a beautiful sunny day. Nobody thinks they're going to get hurt until they get hurt, right? You never think you're going to be the one to get in a car accident until you get in a car accident. So,
Right.
yeah, very similar situation. So we rope up, and I start up the wall.
Okay, so you
Didn't
have ropes at this point?
Yeah, so this one was a rope climb. I was rope climbing at the time, and there's still some mystery in this to what happened as far as the accident part. But I started up the wall. I got up about 60 feet, and I was in a probably about a 10-foot overhang, like pure horizontal overhang. This is the part where I got lucky, but I also got really tired out there in the roof because I've been climbing for so many days that I yelled down to take. That's where your belayer knows to like lock down, and then you can sit on the rope and take your fall safely. And
Okay.
I yelled take and didn't have a whole lot of time to make sure it was cool. I just said take and let go, which is pretty typical. And when I went go, you could see the bolts in front of you start whipping by, and you can imagine like if you were in an elevator that the cord got cut, things just go faster and faster and faster and faster, and you start seeing the floor speeding by.
Oh,
And the minute I saw that first bolt go by, and you feel weightlessness, and you're like, "Oh my goodness!" I'm like, "This is it. This is." You could tell the acceleration was more than outside the ordinary. I've taken thousands of climbing falls in my life, and I knew at this point I was coming down, and I was coming fast. 60 feet, probably not terminal velocity. I don't know how fast it takes to get there, but I wasn't going slow, and I
oh
had.
gosh.
Yeah, I pretty much just said the F word. I was like, fuck,
Yeah.
all the way down. And then I had a premonition in my mind. I was like, well, I'm going to definitely break some legs here. This is probably a leg breaker if it doesn't kill me.
You didn't have like
And
your life flash in front of your eyes or anything like that? Like it.
No, no, none of that. I just saw the opportunity to try to. All I could think is like, okay, this is going bad quickly, and is there anything I can do to make this just a little bit better than like death or like breaking all my legs and back and everything, right? Just
Yeah.
being into the earth. So I actually stuck out my right foot and was going to try to impact one and bring the other one down. I
Oh,
was like, well, maybe we can only mess one leg up was my
oh.
thought. I'm always the optimist. I'm like, well, let's just break one leg. Let's try that out.
Yeah, right?
So as I come screaming down, I stick out that one leg and smash. I just fold that leg up. I smash it. I crash into like a slab, a bouldery slab. I hit it, and apparently for 1 second, I looked over at my ex-wife, and I just said, "You dropped me." And then I passed out and rolled over down this one block, and then I woke up. So I was only out for just a second. I don't remember ever saying that, but I was laying there, and I remember everything was just white, just a brilliant white light. Like people talk about white lights that they
Yeah.
see, like when they're on their deathbed. I saw things like that, right? And all of a sudden, I was just laying there, and it was nothing hurt. I wasn't scared. I wasn't worried about anything. And in fact, I actually thought I was okay. In my mind, I was going to get up and walk home.
Oh
I
my,
was actually going to get up and dust it off because you're insane at that point, right?
yeah.
But all of a sudden, the light starts coming back, and I could see trees and colors, and I started to be able to hear people again, and like sound came back. And I was like, holy cow. And I was looking up the climb, and I was like, I can't believe it. And I'm laying there assessing myself. Leg is like rubber, just laying there, flopping on the ground. And I tried to get up, and I was between two boulders, and I go to lift up, and I heard my back go.
Ugh.
My lower half was started wiggling around. When you hear your spine crunching and you're just wiggling around and your legs like jelly, and I fractured, I blew up my femur in so many places that it wasn't one fracture. The doctor said it was quite literally like a grenade going off in my leg, like shrapnel all in my leg, which is another really difficult story later in the hospital about that. So I'm on the ground. People are freaking out, obviously, because the two friends of my ex-wife are not climbers. This was actually the first time they'd ever gone climbing. So how about an experience for those guys? They'd never even climbed before. They've never even been on a rope, and the first thing they see is somebody take a 60-footer and nearly die. That's their welcoming. I doubt they ever climbed again.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't think they ever even went back to that place again. I think they were probably like, okay, there was a sign for me not to do this.
They're like, probably not going to do that anymore. This looks pretty dangerous, and maybe for the best. I don't, on some level, I probably don't really recommend climbing for most people. Like, you got to want it, right?
Yeah.
Because it can and will kill you if you're not careful. But so the interesting rescue story begins in that I had a friend of mine, because my wife, she actually was hysterical and just kind of went mental and just kind of lost it, and she didn't really know what to do anyway. We're on the other side of a river. You have to take a Tyrolean traverse. That's where you ever seen the movie Cliffhanger?
Yes.
Was, they clip in that line and do that zip line, but the one girl falls like to her death, sort of thing. So
Yeah.
that's a line. You have to cross a line like that, but over class 3 water to get to the climbing area. So now the challenge is to get me out of there with that. Essentially I need to be immobilized. So they call in the rescue. It was fire and rescue, and they have a mountain rescue bunch. They come in and strap me into a board like flat, and they have to go down a scree field full of blocks and rocks, and it's very slippery. They got about 15 people, I think, at this point, like passing me down. Now, to get across the river, they had to commandeer river rafting boats. And so you have these people that take the rafting boat tours. They signaled them off, got one of their boats. They made a makeshift high roll by throwing ropes across and strapped me into the boat, which is super scary if you've ever been neck braced and immobilized on a board and then having to be brought over a raft sideways across a class 3 rapids, only on people standing above you tie rolling. If they
Oh,
dump that boat, I'm dead because I can't swim stuck
yeah.
to a board. So it's kind of like, oh, please, like another perilous danger. Now, the other challenge is the canyon side is too steep to get out the other end. So they had to bring down a fire truck that had an extension ladder that they used to rescue people out of 30-story burning buildings. They pull that out and make a lower winch to come and pick me up. And they lift me out of the canyon on that and swing me back around, lower me onto the road, where I was then put into an ambulance. And then I was driven to the top of a canyon where I was put on a helicopter for Flight for Life and flown down to Denver at that point. Um,
Oh,
and that whole excursion took a few hours, undrugged, because they couldn't give me any pain medic. They didn't know what was wrong with me. They don't know if I'm internally bleeding. So you're just living on adrenaline at this point, like hoping things don't start hurting too bad.
yeah.
Um, and then I ended up in the hospital, and I'll make this part a little bit shorter. I ended up in intensive care for about 2 weeks, had multiple surgeries, and then I was in the hospital for several months recovering. So I went from like the shape of my life to married to employed to like not being able to walk 1 second later to, in almost a year later, I was divorced and, still didn't have any work at the time.
Oh,
And it was like, what they say about life: if it rains, it pours. And that changed the course of my life tremendously, and it's got to be one of the most difficult things I've ever had to deal with personally. Um,
And
Unbelievable.
what was the lesson that you feel you learned from that?
I think one of the biggest lessons that I learned from that is really has to be self control, right? I think self control is the hallmark of anything successful, because one of the things that I would notice in, so you're laying in this hospital bed just around the clock, right? Just can't move. And you have so many emotions, so many feelings of dread, of guilt, of anger, of regret. I can't even go through it all. And one thing I learned that was so important is self-control, not to pay homage to those feelings, that like anything, like time, that they'll also pass, and that a calmer state will occur, that you'll come to a calmer state, just to not allow the internal chatter, and to stay solid in who your core is, who you are, and you're not necessarily this mangled mess in this bed right now that is full of regret and anxiety ridden, with their life is just totally trashed and ruined. And I have a daughter too at the same time who's like sitting here next to my bed saying, daddy, daddy, and I can't do anything, I can't help anybody, and can't make any assurances. So the biggest thing that I learned from it is to really just, it's a small lesson, but not to pay attention to your feelings. Feelings are just that. They're just things you feel. They don't have to own you. They don't have to dictate your next actions, and they don't have to get in your head and make you scared of the world. So, it was really at that time I became like a real kind of, I don't know, not a yes person, but you become more and more, able to do the things you love. Because I'm not
Yeah.
controlled by fear or regret or anger.
So, and those feelings, right? You've got anxiety and fear and regret, and then you've got your good emotions too. But those in particular tend to hold people back from taking a chance at a relationship, to pursuing their own business, to asking for what they want. How can you, how do you just turn those off?
It's not, it's an interesting thing. It's not so much that I turn them off. It's just I don't allow them. I don't. It's hard to describe, but I don't like let them have the attention that they need. And I actually have the same thing with positive emotions actually too, because one of my father's like my hero, and one of the things he used to always tell me, and it wasn't a saying he made up, but it was one that always stuck with me, is disappointment takes proper planning. So it's not that you don't want the good feelings, the hope, and things like that, but they can also be just as devious as the negative emotions, right?
Yeah.
Because you may be optimistic unrealistically in something. So I think a good balance is crucial for me. What's the idea? There's a great NBA player, it might have even been Michael Jordan, never too high, never too low. Right. So it's always like trying to find a good balance. And in the secret for me has been in not letting certain like really excited emotions own me, or like really negative emotions own me. Recognize it, that it's happened. Oh, hi, happiness. There you are, right? This something like the Dalai Lama might say, I see you, happiness. Good to see you. And just accept it as that and let it pass on. The same thing with sadness or regret. Like, I won't feel like this in an hour, and just have confidence that that is not how you'll always feel. It's too easy to get sucked into the trap of feelings, right? It's always like, well, how do you feel today? How do you feel? Well, it doesn't matter how you feel. Life is not about, to me, experiencing life is not necessarily about how I feel. It's about how I control myself in all the encompassness of everything that's happening in emotions and life and people and decisions and situations.
Yeah.
It can be overwhelming, but you just have to sit back, have self-control, and really listen to what it is that's true to you. That's your base core, what makes you.
Okay, so what are some tips to gain self-control for somebody that maybe like has anxiety or a lot of regret, especially now given the climate of everything that's going on? Like, how do you start?
It's just like anything. You just start. It's tough. The first thing, you have to like have a conscious practice that if you have a negative thought, and sometimes this is where I think coaching can help. Like some people have life coaches, things like that. I've never personally had any, but I've had some really good friends that are like life coaches that I can bounce things off of. And it's just to really recognize when you're, too high, and to be able to recognize when you're too low. Like becoming more self-reflective would probably be the first thing. So it's kind of on its head in a way. At first, you have to like really pay attention to your feelings to know that you're having them, and then you have to learn to also then not pay attention to those feelings when you're having them.
And who do you admire in kind of are you like a Tony Robbins type?
Tony Robbins, yeah, man, that guy's got huge hands.
So that means he probably's got a huge cock.
No, no, my biggest hero's really got to be my father. He really is got to be, and it's not just because he's my father. I mean, he gets a lot of respect from great people. He was a former vice president of one of the largest paper companies in the world at the time, called Champion International, and he has had his ups and downs. I mean, he was wildly successful in his work and career life. Retired at I think he was like 45, 46 years old, not too much older than me, but ended up getting hit by a drunk driver that broke his leg and collapsed his lung and changed his life. By the way, he was my climbing partner and who I got into climbing with at a young age. And we had climbed all the way up to this point, but this tragic drunk driving accident took him out of commission. And then after that, he also got testicular cancer, which he survived that as well. And now he has Parkinson's. But you can't make the man sit down. Yeah, he's just full on. He's 65 years old. No, 66, I think, this year. And he's full on. He's out now. So his original academics was he was a chemist. So he has a great affinity for chemistry, biology, things like that. And so in his older age, and to keep him active with Parkinson's, one of the things he really wanted to do is he went out and bought a herd of cattle. He has 100 acres in Texas, and he's running a microbiology experiment on his land. He's rejuvenating his land from basically like volleyball beach sand from over farming to actually making this lush, tall green grass by naturally it's called mob grazing, where you take cattle and you put them in an electric fence and they're not stagnant. They get moved every day or every other day. So they always have a new section of a field.
Wow.
As opposed to like stock feeding animals where you see them in these limited spaces where they're at 100% of the time. It's all dirt. It stinks. You can smell it when you drive by down the road and you hate it, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't do that. He moves his cattle around. So you got a 65-year-old, one leg, one ball, one-legged, one-lunged Parkinson guy out herding around, a near head of 30 cattle on a daily basis, running 6,000-volt wires.
Good for him.
He's an amazing person. So he's my hero. He's taught me, so much about discipline, persistence, self-control, and I attribute all of my life's success and endeavors to his guidance for sure.
So yeah, you were very lucky to have that. So your tips for self-control, you said, obviously be self-reflective, pay attention to those feelings, let them pass. Yep. Is there anything else that your father taught you that you can pass on?
One of the other things that I've found to be extraordinary is, really going after what your passion is. The other end of self-control for me is really being able to tap into, and maybe you guys have heard of this. It's not like I'm the first person to ever talk about this thing. It's called a flow state, right? Mm-hmm. And to describe what a flow state is, it's such an extreme level of focus to where there's no ability to see anything but what is present before you, right? Many people have heard of this, living present in yourself, right? Always being present. And this is, by the way, is a big draw of why I like climbing and what I do it for. It's the mechanism that I connect with most for the flow state to find it is through climbing. So it can be anything. Some people find it in running. Some people find it in weight training or being a CEO or delivering pizzas. You can find it doing whatever you want. The point is you got to find it. If you haven't found the flow state, keep looking, because you got to find it. When you find that, that will help you identify what your passion is. To me, the things that I'm passionate about are the things that allow me naturally or easily enough to slip into a flow state. For instance, if I do a climb that's really hard for me, I won't even remember it when I'm done. Like I'll be at the top of the climb and have literally no recollection. Like if somebody didn't get a picture or video of it, wiped from my memory. I have no recollection of it. It's like total amnesia. That is how you know you're in the flow state. You'll
So
have no memories of it.
how do you get to the flow state?
For me, it's pushing risk, right? Pushing adventure. That's how I do it. That's how I do it, right? But because if you want extraordinary experiences in life, you got to take extraordinary risks in
Yep.
life.
Amen.
And that to me, when I invoke in these, I like to make them safe as I possibly can, but that element of risk, rather than having the adverse reaction of like panic and fear and having the opposite effect, for whatever reason, climbing brings me in closer to it. I draw in closer. So often the more panic state it is, or the scarier it is, and the more adrenaline you get. I've learned over my 30 years just to not accept those, to just breathe deep, breathe deep, and just absorb it and turn it to energy. Turn fear to energy. And then your focus will guide you, and you'll move up things that felt impossible before, and you'll disappear into a state of presentness that has no memory. It has no recollection. It just
So
is. You're just doing.
why do you think that the present state, which everybody says is the calming state, right,
Mhm.
has no memory?
It's interesting. I think it's just because you're in such a level of focus that if you weren't that focused, if you were thinking about remembering it, there wouldn't be enough capacity, right? I don't think you can. It's like walking, chewing gum, and patting yourself and rubbing yourself on the head at the same times. You can't do all those things at once. You can only be extraordinarily focused, and to do that, you can't even have the brain firing to create memories, at least not ones that I can get to. I mean, I seriously have done so many things that if I didn't have a picture, I would not even remember. Like it's half my climbing career I don't remember.
Wow. So and that's what age were you when you felt like you finally were able to reach the flow state?
You know, I didn't recognize it for a long time, but with climbing, it was almost immediate, because I loved climbing and I knew I loved climbing, but it took many years to find out, why do you love climbing? What is it about, when you're self-reflecting, you're like, why do I actually like this? Like, why this is super dangerous and like off the cusp. But when I first started climbing, there were like two climbing gyms in the country. It was considered like a, counterculture, kind of dirtbagger. Nowadays it's very popular and there's climbing gyms, and I think that's great because it's a wonderful thing for a lot of people. But originally there wasn't much guidance or noise around it. It's something people found and was more of an oddball sort of thing to do at the time. So I didn't really understand it that much. I just knew that I liked to be outside and that I liked the way climbing made me feel, but I wasn't really sure what that was. I was too young to identify those feelings. I didn't even know what internal chatter was. I didn't recognize myself talking, to
Yeah.
myself.
So what are your tips now with all this experience of how to turn off that voice in your head?
Yeah, I just, I have terrible feelings. I have dread and regret. And before I go out and try something really hard, like I have, plenty of like fears of failure that what if I can't do this? And I get all excited, like, what if I can do it, but then I blow it and all this stuff. But I just calm down. And one of the things that I do before I actually begin climbing, first off, going out to the climb, I just let all those feelings happen. And I just don't acknowledge them. Yeah, 1 minute I'm scared to death. Next minute I feel super confident I'm going to do it. 10 minutes later, walking through the woods on the way out, I'm like, I'm scared again. And then you walk up on this huge climb and you're like, oh God, I'm really going to do that. You're like, really? That's where I'm going to do this? You're like, okay, don't think about that. Just put your gear down, start preparing. You know what to do. And before I get on the wall, and people have made fun of me for this a little bit before. It's maybe kind of yogi-ish, I guess, but I'll start breathing. If you watch some videos, sometimes it's just and I'll just let breath settle me. And really what that is I envision, if you could imagine taking everything in your brain, deep breathing it, and literally blowing it out. Right? You ever heard? I had this high school mom. I can't remember her name. She used to always tell people. She'd say, "Hey guys, everybody, just calm down, blow it up into a balloon, and let it go." right? Just
Yeah,
let that go.
great
And
enough.
that's exactly what I'm doing in a sense. I go out and I start to control my breathing, and the control breathing is to clear my mind and just start letting myself do what I do. The biggest thing people need to do half the time, I think, is get out of their own way. Get out of your own
Yep.
way with your negative thoughts, with your positive thoughts. You're over optimistic or you're under optimistic. You're scared, you're happy, whatever. It doesn't even matter. Being like over optimistic can be as bad as under optimistic, right? You want to be in confidence in the right balance. And I think if you just get out of your own way and allow yourself to stop thinking so you can act, it's hard to act when you're thinking. I don't know, but people say we're in a world of multitasking. I am not a multitasker. I do one thing at a time, and I do one thing at a time really well. And that's the thing I'm doing. So I have to clear my mind and let my experience, let my physical training go to work. Like an athlete playing football, or, I got friends that play lacrosse that are very similar. Like, you do so much work that comes down to reflex. Just get out of your own way and just do what you do best. And for me, that's climbing. That's just getting the movement, start going.
Yeah, and so do you feel that your pure mental focus that you have in rock climbing is applied to other areas of your life as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. It couldn't be more translatable. And in my whole life, it's been something I've tried to move into my work career. And I do the same thing. I work like I climb, and I climb like I work. Uh, and I address like everything that I do with the same level of what I'd like to say, same level of self control and discipline, and a lot of that comes down to planning and just doing the things that you need to do and not the things that you want to do.
Right. And that's so well said, and it's amazing, and so many of us have trouble getting to that point, right? We'll start a project or an assignment, and you get a block or you get distracted, and then you're like, well, I'll move on to something else on my to-do list or whatever you have, and then come back to it. How do
Yeah.
you train your mind and your brain to say, no, this is the only thing that's entering my headspace right now?
Yeah, it just takes practice, I think. And like say, you have to recognize that's what you want to do first to begin to practice that.
Yeah.
And I don't, some people maybe they don't ever really get there. I've met people, their minds are just a kind of a flight, and they don't even know that, they don't even have control of what they're thinking. So you have to first acknowledge that you don't actually have control of what you're thinking. And you have to be okay with that. I think that's a good first initial step, is become self-reflective, and you have to have a drive for it. There has to be some underlying motivation. For me, it's I've had tragedy. It's been a great motivator of that, and I think that's a lot of the case for many people that I've talked to in very similar situations. You almost never learn anything when things are going well, right? I mean, you know you never fix the hole in the roof when it's sunny out. You only regret it when it's raining.
Exactly, right?
That's right.
Yeah, it's just one of those. But yeah, it is an interesting thing of just pure focus can get you to accomplish your goals just so much faster.
Absolutely, absolutely. Focus is focus is everything. Focus is everything, and discipline as well, right? Focus is the performance end of it to me. I don't always have to be focused to be disciplined. Like a lot of times when I train, I may not be at that level of focus because it's like preparation. So focus for me is really a performance time sort of thing. Like that's my game. That's my game face. That's my game time plan. I wish that, one thing I'm trying to do is be more present every day in every activity. It's super hard to always be present, but hey, I got to have goals too.
Right, you do. And that's the thing too. Sometimes exactly. Sometimes it's like you'll be in a conversation and you're there, but you're kind of maybe thinking about what you're going to say next or
Right.
what you have to do later that day, and but it's really like maintaining, kind of working on that mental goal and that practice of just saying, okay, there's nothing I can do about it right now, so just stay stay
Yeah,
present.
in a lot of self-education. I mean, I've spent years studying strength training, nutrition. In fact, I was let go during the pandemic. I may get rehired, but I work for a wonderful company called Generation UCAN, a specialty retail manager there, and they have an outstanding slow digesting carbohydrate. By the way, neat backstory on that because I actually used this product, and this is how I got to work for this company. In weight loss because it's a uniquely slow digesting carbohydrate. It helps balance your blood sugar. In other words, it helps you not be hungry. So uh, let's just digress for a second and talk about some weight loss issues because it's important for climbing. And one of the things I wanted to do after my climbing accident is I was sitting on my couch. I'd gone through my divorce. I'm still sitting here like in a body brace and I'd been eating junk food and like drinking whiskey and feeling sorry for myself, right? I was just in the worst place imaginable. And
Yeah.
I remember sitting there just, thinking, well, this is the whole deal. This is it for me. Like I had my best shot at it, right? And then I remember sitting on the couch saying, this is not going to be my story. I'm not going out like this. This is not going to be how it ends for me. And I immediately started to be like, I'm going to lose the weight. I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to work on my mind and struggle through the disappointment of the divorce and the lost work and the injuries that I have. And the doctor says you'll never climb again. And it's my lifeblood. And I don't know if I'll be able to do all that. And I started looking for ways to lose weight because to lose weight, you just need to be in a calorie deficit. I mean, there's volumes of books on it and all this stuff, but at the end of the day, it's calories in, calories out, right?
Yeah.
You have to like you can lose weight on Skittles. It's not healthy. Don't recommend it. Don't anybody do it, but it can be done. Not ideal. However, the biggest part about weight loss is consistency because you're always an uphill battle against hunger. So I found in this, I was going with low carb ketogenic diets at the time. I found this carbohydrate company called UCAN in a book called The Art and Science of Low Carbohydrate Living by a guy named Jeff Volek. Love him to death, by the way. And uh, and I started using this carbohydrate as a dietary supplement because one of the claims was it helps curb hunger. So if you can
Yeah.
drink 100 calories of this stuff and it'll last for 3 hours, that's a win. I eat a banana, it only lasts an hour. It's
Yeah.
100 calories too, right?
Yeah.
So the longer calories can last you without them being in a surplus or at maintenance, you'll lose weight. So I was implementing in UCAN. It's a product. It's actually called Super Starch, and I was taking it about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I would be less hungry and have a smaller dinner and consistency over time. I ended up losing nearly 60 pounds, I think it was. This is like 8 years ago. I kind of forget now, but it was I lost a ton
Wow.
of weight. Yes. So that was really fantastic achievement for me. And that was a turning point, Warren. I kind of realized that I'm like, I can be totally wrecked to the end of my wits and I can still win this thing. I can still, I'm like, I can find things, I can research. Self improvement's a real thing. And that's when I started realizing that really my only limitation is my ability to ask the right questions, to research, to look, to go find what it is that I seek and not sit there and wish that I could find what I seek. I see too often like daydreaming about your retirement house or this, big bankrolls and all these. I'm like, don't spend time thinking about having those things. Spend time getting those things. Spend time
Love
working
it.
on action plans that make those things a reality. Don't just sit there and hope land and hope you
Yeah.
win the next Powerball. I'm like, get
Yeah.
your butt out there and go to work on your dreams, And
Yeah.
yeah, you're probably not going to make it on a lot of stuff, but again, that's okay, right? That's just part of it. You're going to fall a lot. You're going to fail a lot. You just got to keep going with what you're doing, and that's when I really realized that, and that I could fix myself through my own seeking of knowledge. That I could bring myself up through finding out other smart things people have done, that I don't have to create the world myself. I just need to find what it is I need to do and to put a game plan for that and have the self-control and discipline to follow that indefinitely. And then everything starts coming together. And I rebuilt my life and I ended up having a tremendous career with UCAN. Hopefully I get back to work with them after this pandemic, but even if I don't, They were like family. They're beautiful bunch of people, and and it was a career I loved. I traveled the countryside as a traveling salesman and lived with people in their Airbnbs, and had unbelievable experiences that just absolutely changed my life. If you want some life changing experience, go work in sales and go work in traveling sales. You're going to meet hundreds, I mean, tens of thousands of people.
Yeah.
All the time you're meeting lots of people, and that's, you get to see all these different mentalities, and we have these conversations like we're having on like what makes a person, what motivates a person, you
Yeah.
know, what is someone's drive, how does someone find their focus, and it was maybe the coolest experience of my life.
So were you able to, with meeting all these different types of people, kind of maybe provide some of your lessons you've learned to help better their lives?
Absolutely. That's one of the things I wanted to do, because working at UCAN and this particular product was something that I really related with. And it was something that I have a personal passion for, nutrition and, renewable energies and outdoor sports and things like that. And one of the things I really thought is I had so much success in this way that I was like, I could show this to other people. I'm like, this is
Yeah.
really cool. And not just UCAN itself, but going out and talking with people about, it was a vehicle to help me go out and talk to people about changing their life, about changing their mentalities. Like if you came to see me at a demonstration table where I was showing your product, you were going to get a conversation, not just about what I'm trying to sell you here, but
Yeah.
about like changing your life, about making a difference to yourself and like how you can do that. And I would share my experiences, which would open up people to tell me back, and we would play and learn off of one another. And I've learned so much from other people. People are so important. We need each other.
Yes.
We have to be around each other, because this is who you learn from. Everything I know is from someone else.
Well, that's exactly right. And I think that kind of brings us to a point that we're in now of, there's a lot of heated emotions and different opinions on things. And you have to remember, just because somebody doesn't agree with you, you could actually learn from them
Absolutely,
and open
absolutely.
your mind.
We are in such divided times. It's really odd. I've never seen it so Republican, Democrat, and just such polars these days. And I'm like, again, too high, too low, too
Yeah.
Republican, too Democrat, right? I'm like, it's
Yeah.
very similar. I'm like, everyone needs to find a balance and breathe.
Yeah.
Take some deep breaths, and like, let's focus on how we're going to do this together, not against one another. No one is going to win.
No.
The left isn't going to win, the right isn't. We're going to win this thing together by those that decide that everyone is the most important thing. The
Yeah.
individual you have to consider your peers, and without the empathy to hand out to those people, you'll never hear their voice. So if you're not an empathetic person, I would definitely advise it working on that, so you can be compassionate enough to understand other people.
That's exactly right. And it's learning from your experiences, but learning from those around you. They always
Absolutely.
say, like, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. It's true. Like, if you're the richest person in the room, you're again in the wrong room. Like, find out how to better be around people. Like, I've heard this before with previous guests, is, you are a sum of the top 5 people that you consistently hang out with. So it's choose wisely, so to say.
Absolutely, and I think there's a great deal of truth to that, and that's one of the things. People are everything. People are everything. It's the whole deal.
Yeah. So what do you feel like is your biggest regret, and kind of how did you overcome that?
My biggest regret. Hmm. Really. And I don't want this to sound bad, because I'm father of a, about to be a 17-year-old senior high school, and I love being a father, and it's changed my life, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. But one thing that I knew very early on, going on back in high school, I had all my friends were applying and getting into these colleges, and they were like Harvard, Ivy League. Like, these people are crazy. I grew up in Darien, Connecticut in high school. It's kind of a New England town, like
Yeah.
pretty wealthy. A lot of those guys ride the commuter trains in New York. These are Park
Yeah.
Ave type of parents. Um, And I knew I was something different, and I had no real drive. I didn't really want to go to college. I didn't really have this traditional mindset. So even though I ended up going that route, it was more my parents talked me into it. I knew for me that what I needed to do was just to go into the world and just climb and not worry about how are you going to survive. We're so in, embedded and rightly so in many respects, and like how are you going to pay rent, and you become monetized yourself, right? Like how are you going to take
Good.
care of yourself and make money and provide that. I was willing at a young age just to go out and starve and just do what I needed to do. And the fact that I didn't actually do that, and I didn't take that personal challenge, and I went to a traditional university, as good as it is and all the great things that happened to me, I still regret to this day that I didn't go do it my way right away. And now I'm going to be going on. I may be 45, 50 years old before I get to living in the van, like the van life, hashtag van life. Well,
Yeah.
I've been wanting to do that since I was 16 years old. Before, like it was still like 60, the hippies of the 60s were the van people then. They didn't have the sprinters and things. But at any rate, I wanted to be a dirtbagger. I wanted to go experience life, and it wasn't about money, and it wasn't about success, and it wasn't about any of that, or marriage, or relationships, or nothing. I wanted to just go be an experience, and I didn't do it when I should have. I took the traditional route and went to a university, and no regrets on that, I guess, except for it would be a very different life had I just walked out the door and said no to my parents, and if I had enough brass to do it my own. But I was young and didn't know, and my parents were still paying for everything and had a lot of clout over me. They had a lot of pull, and
Yeah.
I went that way. And I wish at the time I'd been strong enough to know that no, I didn't want to do it just because I didn't like school and I didn't want to be a deadbeat dropout. I knew there was something inside me that I would be fine, that I would make it, that I was going to make this life maximize because I'm not lazy. I didn't want to not go the traditional route because I'm a lazy person. I wasn't dodging work or school. Like my day of adventure would be 1,000 times harder than an office job. I'm like, come try it out.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's not like you're just laying around doing nothing. These would be crazy, life-changing adventures that you're on. So it wasn't for that at all. It just felt like that was my purpose, and I didn't take it when I was young.
So, which is, I feel like a lot of people can relate to that and understand. I mean, a lot of people kind of do things as they're growing up when we're conditioned at a very young age to please our parents, to please our elders, to behave, to not do certain things. And we kind of get trapped and we end up going down the traditional road. What would your advice be if there are parents out there listening and they have either young kids or teenage kids? And their child kind of confronted them with that, or even your advice to help parents help their child find their own way versus their way. What would you say to those people?
Man, that's a really great question. And I'm currently kind of going through that a little bit now with my daughter. She's looking at schools and wants to go to school. She graduates this next year.
Uh-huh.
The one thing I constantly have to focus on is to not try to tell her not to do things that I'm scared of, right?
Interesting.
I don't want to get in her way because she knows more about her than I ever will. Even though she's an adolescent, she's still a young kid and has a world to learn, but that's not to discount what she doesn't know about herself. And if you get in the way of that, I think you can do more harm than good long term. I think you have to let people fail. You have to let people be willing to make their mistakes. You have to let them suffer. She comes and climbs with me and she falls off and sometimes she gets hurt.
Okay.
Welcome to climbing. I'm like, you're gonna fall off, you're gonna get hurt. It's rock climbing. Do you want to be a rock climber? You know what I mean? I bring her out, you fall, you get hurt. Do you still
Yeah.
want to do this? The answer is yes or no, and you'll either stay with it or graduate away from it. And I don't know that life is all too much the same, but I do see parents trying to direct their kids on their old dreams or try to steer them away from things that they are scared of. I'm like, don't let your personal fears and mental things get in the way. I try to be an observer and I want to keep her safe, but you got to let the kids play. You got to let the kids go out and play, you
Yeah.
know? Got to
Well,
let them go make their decisions.
yeah, it was like what you were saying earlier is we don't learn from the things that we do right. We learn from the things that we do wrong.
A lot of times,
Oh,
unfortunately. Except for my brother. I actually, my brother's kind of an anomaly. He's a really smart guy. I don't know how he did it, but he like got everything he wanted to do right, or at least it seems maybe if he was on the show here, he'd probably say something different. But from an outside perspective, he's like one of those people that's just like an amazing guy that just seemed to just hit it all just right for him, that is, you know. He's
Right.
very happy with himself. So another person I really look up to is my older brother in that way. He's really just, you're just like, wow, how did you nail it? So just like, boop, boop, boop. I've never seen anyone just dial it in like that. Not me. I'm like, I'm the classic up here and there and over there, and you come back here and we're over there. You know, you make this whole roundabout journey to become who you are. And some people, you know, I don't know. It
Well,
maybe
that's,
is more innate for some.
yeah, well, maybe that kind of, your brother's mindset was probably very different. You know, his mindset was that life was easy and that he would accomplish all his goals and it would be fine and he would always have enough. That can, that creates that life, right?
Yeah.
Versus fear kind of seeping in.
Well, for him, it was like he just recognized early on. He's a real smart guy. Carnegie Mellon, like MBA, Park Ave, like, you know, financial guy down in New York. Has done very well for himself. And I think what his winning quality is, he knew early on that if he was going to have, and he'll tell you this himself, if he was going to have to work at all for any reason, I'm going to make a lot of money. Work it, make
Yeah.
it. That was his thing. That
Yeah.
may not be yours or anybody else's, but he's told me, he's like, that's one of the things. He's like, if I'm going to go and spend my time and effort working, then by God, I'm going to go do everything I can do. I was the same way with climbing. He's just very analytical, very like studious, where my intelligence is more in like physical, right? I'm like a gymnast. You know, that's where I draw for a lot of my intelligence. I'm very, you know, passionate about that. But that was his thing. He's like, if you're gonna do it, he's like, if I gotta go to work, like why work and, you know, and settle for mediocrity? And he's always been
Yeah.
a go-getter in that way. So he's always an inspiration if you're looking for a traditional like trajectory in your life. Like, my God, there's probably no one better. You should have him on the show. You want
Yeah.
to talk to me about other stuff, you know, but if you're trying to win the traditional game, he'll certainly give you some pointers. Of course,
Yeah.
he's interesting, and you know, a lot of it is a lot of hard luck and a lot of, I mean, a lot of hard effort, but also a lot of luck. And many people in his neighborhood, they're very successful bunch, and they're all very humble, and they'll tell you, they're like, man, I was just working my butt off, and the right thing came along, and I was able to see the opportunity, and then was able to realize it because I wasn't scared to. That was it,
Yeah.
and they just did it.
Right. That's exactly right. Is getting rid of that fear, as you were saying
Right.
earlier.
Yeah.
So we do have to wrap up, but I just kind of want to. You talked about not allowing like negative or positive emotions control you too much, but you're a
Mm-hmm.
very positive guy. So I want you to kind of leave the listeners with some tips on, you know, having an overall positive outlook on life and kind of a positive attitude that you naturally seem to have.
Yeah, and you know, I would say right away a positive attitude is a lot of times a reflection of things you're actually doing. So here's some things I would say.
Okay.
Actual eat really good food, right? And you don't need to be ketogenic, carnivore, or any fad diets. Just eat meat and veggies and fruits in a correct way throughout the in serving sizes throughout the day that suits your personal diet. Like literally eat good because it'll make you'll be less hungry, you'll be healthier, and then you got to sleep really well. Sleep is so important. Most people have no idea. I'm like, oh, sleep. We have this thing in our culture. It's almost like taking pride in the fact that you didn't sleep so much because you work so much. I'm like that. I'm like, don't celebrate that. I'm like, you should get better at planning your sleep.
Yeah.
Sleep is huge because if you're not rested and you're not fed well, then you're not going to have any kind of stamina in your mind to actually do the things that I'm talking about, to be self-reflective, to have the emotional discipline to not pay attention to anger, to not be an angry person and yell at someone in a grocery store because you snapped.
Right.
Have that self-control. And we both know if you're not hungry and you're well slept and you've slept well, so the first thing you can do that's reasonable is actually take care of yourself, right? Eat
Yeah.
well, sleep good, exercise, and be cognizant of the things you're thinking and really consider where it is you want to take your life. And if you're not there yet, why not? Think about these things. and just know that you're going to have a lot of negative thoughts and positive thoughts. Just don't worry about that stuff. You wake up tired and groggy in the morning. By noon, you're rocking and rolling. But if you had stayed in that first, I don't want to get up and go to work attitude, if that lasted all day, what kind of day would you have? You'd have a poo-poo day. It'd be terrible.
Yeah.
So, good food, good rest, and self-reflection, work on finding it out, what it is that makes you tick, what you do best. Some people don't even know what they do best because they're so busy doing things for other people. They don't even know what they do best yet. So work on that,
I mean, what a great way to wrap up. That was beautifully said. And it's true. People just think like, positive attitude. Okay, it all starts with my thoughts. Yes, it does. But it all starts with the key that you were saying: sleep well, eat well, exercise. Healthy body produces a healthy mind, and vice versa.
Right. That's right. 100%.
So you guys, with that being said, I obviously want to thank my guests, Luke Childers, and you can kind of follow him on his rock climbing adventures. Plug your Instagram so people can come.
It's on Instagram. I'm See Luke Go. If you want to come check it out, I post fairly regularly. So
and that's SEE or
no? It's letter lowercase c, and then it's like _ Luke _ Go. So literally like the letter C, Luke Go.
Perfect. So you guys can kind of look at some of his stuff and maybe get in touch with him if you want any more tips of kind of staying disciplined and focused and things of that sort. But I think it's important that you go after what you want. And if you're in the dead end job, as I said before, make some changes, and why not live the life that you deserve to live? And I think that's kind of today's message is positivity, focus, and self-control, and not letting your emotions dictate your entire life. So with that being said, I thank you all again for listening to another episode of Next to Madison, and we'll see you guys next time to find out who's next. Hi, your host, Madison Malloy here. I just wanted to remind you guys to please follow the show on social media at Next to Madison. And if you have any questions or suggestions for the show, or you feel that you would be a great guest on the show and would love to be considered, please feel free to email me at nexttomadison@gmail.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on all podcast platforms. And I thank you again for listening.